Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Knowledge Bank webinar. Today's session is being hosted by Fraser at Wevo, and he is going to be talking to you about how to cost-effectively scale EV charging. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get through as many as possible at the end. The webinar is being recorded today and will be available to watch back on the News on the Block YouTube channel. We will also have a copy of the slides for anyone that would like to see them again after the webinar. That is all from me, and I am now going to hand you over to Fraser to begin.
Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate the introduction, and it's nice to meet everyone. And I'm looking forward to presenting Wevo to all of you and what we do to support MDUs and property managers with our software to enable scaling of EV charging on site. Before I do, normally I would ask a question. It's a lot easier in person, but if you could kindly in the chat, if anyone could answer, does anyone know what OCPP stands for and what it enables? I'd be really interested to understand if anyone has any understanding around that. So please put it into the chat and we can revisit that at the end. So without further ado, I'll get started. And here's a bit about Wevo. So we were founded in 2021, and who we are and what we do. So who we are a charge point management system, and we use OCPP to manage, monitor, and optimize EV chargers agnostically. And we do that all from the cloud without any extra hardware. And through that, the way Wevo came about is our co-founders, Adi and Teddy, with our background from energy. So they both worked for Centrica. They built the Hive EV solution in the UK, and then left Centrica and created Wevo Energy. And that's why, as a company with our software, we focus on optimization on site, optimizing the energy and the end user experience. And in doing that, we hope to remove the barriers to EV charging at apartment blocks and seamlessly scale EV charging on site as well, also adding in other renewable assets if there is an opportunity to do so. So we've been around since 2021, so about 2.5 years now. We've got over 500 sites on our platform. The majority of these are in MDUs. The business actually comes from Israel originally, and as you can imagine, there is a high metropolis city there with some very big residential complexes and MDUs with high density parking spaces. And so initially the product was built around those kinds of settings and enabling more chargers on site and effective management of those chargers. And then scaled that into America, where our biggest operations are predominantly in New York and some of the other big municipal cities across Northern America. And these are also residential MDU settings. And we have thousands going into tens of thousands of chargers that are all from apartment blocks themselves. So this is very much our bread and butter and our specialty as a software solution. So why Wevo? Wevo stands out from our competitors because we are specialists in 3 sections. As mentioned, we have the expertise in energy, and that enables us to optimize EV charging on site, being able to scale the number of chargers using the existing available power. So you may have noticed when you're dealing with installers or charge point operators trying to add chargers onto site that actually you have a very limited of supply to enable those chargers to be brought live on site. And you need to be able to either go to the DNO, the distribution network operator, to upgrade your capacity, which can be quite costly and can take a long period of time, or you need to be able to optimize what you have on site already. And that's where Wevo comes in. Wevo comes in because we can take what your available capacity is right now, and in most instances, we should be able to get enough chargers onto site for you for the amount of drivers that need to charge for any period of time. And so what we say is we can get up to 20 times more chargers on site using our AI algorithm than a standard EV charger. And then beyond just optimizing the power, we can also integrate other renewable assets such as battery energy storage and solar PV. We also specialize in the software and the AI side of things, which is what enables the algorithm to constantly learn, manage the power optimization, but also create profiles for EV drivers. So if you have a private residence with one driver to one charger, then what you can do is, using our algorithm, you can create a profile for those drivers over time, because it learns all of their charging behaviors and it understands when they plug in and when they plug out. For instance, you might have Joe Bloggs, who's coming home from work at 7 p.m., plugs in at 8 p.m., and then needs the car at 8 a.m. And that's a very standard use case and a very standard profile. But within 10 other drivers, all on the same system, they might have different profiles, and it will create those profiles for them over time, meaning that they can plug in, know that they'll have 100% charge by the next day. They'll optimize all of that charging, but also we can delay the charging sessions so that it's optimized during off-peak windows. Therefore, you're capitalizing on cheaper costs as well. Then finally, we have e-mobility, where we can communicate to the vehicles. We're experts in terms of telecommunications, so we can look at further optimization in terms of being able to capture cheaper costs and optimize the charging with the vehicle itself. So just to go into the numbers a bit more, so some of the headlines about what we do at Wevo and how we can enable you as property managers to drivers and getting EV charging infrastructure on site. We're able to enable up to 30% reduction in installation costs. I'll go into this in a bit more detail in some of the following slides, but simply, essentially, using the power dynamic load management that we do, we can distribute the power very effectively and enable more chargers onto site without the need for upgrading the supply. But beyond that, we can also enable what we call daisy chain charging, where you just have one cable that feeds to each charger. And that ultimately leads to a reduction in cost of around 30% as an average. We can also enable off-peak charging, which is where there is a window of cheaper charging. It's often overnight. It often sits for about 5 hours. And then we can delay charging sessions so that they only charge during that period to ensure that you're capitalizing on the cheaper costs. And that's normally around a 60% reduction in cost to the end driver. We can increase the number of chargers on site by 20x, which I've got into. And then we can make billing extremely simple. So we have different ways in which drivers can turn up and use the chargers. We essentially just need to input the energy tariff from site, and then we can create completely bespoke rate plans for each individual charger for each driver. So for instance, you could have a driver where they have the charger private to them as a resident, and they use an RFID or a QR code to access that charger. Or you can make that charger accessible to a group of users who want to use that same charger, and only they would be able to access it. Or equally, you can make it a completely public charger to users within the Wevo ecosystem. Or one step beyond that, you can add it into roaming networks as well, such as the likes of ZapMap or Hubject. And then we're also solar ready. Just in the last weeks, Wevo was acquired by one of the largest global solar players, which is SolarEdge. And now we can provide solar integrated EV charging. And that will only bring costs down to the end users, and obviously increases ESG on site as well. And we're extremely flexible as a solution. So our product and our platform is built in a very modular way to be able to adapt to different settings. So no matter what the MDU setting is, we can adapt our software solution to suit that setting itself. And then just to go into a bit more of the nitty-gritty and the details behind the solution that we have. So what we can enable is hierarchical energy management. So we use AI-based predictive load balancing, and that is the two factors that enable scaling of EV charging and automation of the user experience. We can provide demand-based charging, where we delay the charging sessions to cheaper periods. We obviously have transparent monthly billing with all of the tenants. We can also enable a monthly fee. So in the instance where a landlord may want to pay for the infrastructure on the behalf of the tenants, then we can support the landlord in imposing a monthly fee or membership fee, shall we say, to access those EV chargers. we have different ways of accessing the chargers in terms of being able to initiate the charge, whether that's a charge key, so an RFID, QR codes, or just simply turning up as the public, scanning the QR code with your camera, and then initiating the charge on a web page. We have white labeling, where we can white label the solution itself to be in line with your branding. We have the data-driven analytics in the background. It's fully a cloud-based solution. So for us to come in and manage the EV chargers and manage all of the energy, scale the infrastructure, none of that requires additional hardware. It can be all done via the cloud. We have the EV driver experience where they use the app. Our app is all about simplification. So what I'm talking to you about right now might seem like quite complex use cases and complex issues and things that we're trying to solve. But actually what we do is on the front end, so what the driver experience is, simplify this as much as possible to them, where it's either completely automated or it's very intuitive of how you use the app to make sure that you get enough charge for the next day. Because let's be honest, all people mostly care about is what's it going to cost me? Is it green? And will I have enough charge the next day? And that's the three things that we focus on here at Wevo. We're also hardware agnostic. So because we are OCPP and it being an open protocol, we are able to agnostically take charge of any EV charger on the market that is OCPP compliant. So whichever charger your tenants would like, we can make that happen for them. We're also an extremely secure system. So we ourselves, when we are onboarding EV charging hardware to our system, we go through 150 different tests to ensure that we're happy that they're a Wevo approved. And one of the big aspects of that is ensuring that the entire network is secure. As we may have seen, there's been a number of cybersecurity attacks lately in the UK, some of them even on the EV charging infrastructure. So we need to ensure that from an OCPP security level, we're right at the top. We can provide flexible pricing, multiple payment options, QR stickers, and then member and segment users. So we can split it up so that you have members who is anyone that uses the Wevo app. So that would be a tenant, for example, but we can also have other segment users who turn up and use the chargers without using the app whatsoever, just using their camera. So it has full flexibility to any setting for any MDU. So just to go into a bit more about how we can scale EV charging on site and massively reduce costs to the landlords and to property managers. This top example here is an example of a standard legacy charging infrastructure where you have a main distribution panel, and then from the distribution panel, you feed cables to each individual charger. So just in this small example where we have up to 12 chargers, you could have around 1 kilometer of cable length, which is where a lot of the excessive costs come in when you are actually installing the EV charging. And this is all the costs that will be put onto the landlords and the property managers. And then those costs can potentially be incurred by the drivers. So this is really how we can reduce costs as much as possible, is by using the Wevo software, where we distribute power between the chargers. And because we distribute power between the chargers, you then don't need all of these separate cables feeding off the distribution panel to the chargers. You can actually just have one cable as a flat cable. A good solution would be the Wieland flat cable, or you can use EV chargers that have daisy chaining capabilities inbuilt themselves. Good examples would be Nextblue as one. And then in doing so, you only need one run of cable, which would then reduce the cable length down to 150 meters. And it also would reduce the amount of time spent on site by the EV installers, and therefore the labor costs come down as well. So it actually brings down the costs. And later on in this slideshow, I'll show you a case study where we prove just how much money we can save for a specific MDU. And then beyond just one panel, the beauty about the Wevo Energy solution as a software is that we can scale this throughout any topology of any site. So if you have a multi-residential complex and you have multiple floors of underfloor car parking as an example, the Wevo software, if you think about it in simple terms, because it's a cloud-to-cloud solution, we are simply looking down from the cloud at all of these chargers and able to distribute the power using just the software alone throughout the entire topology of any site. Whereas certain hardware solutions that provide similar load management can only do it on one panel because it's all done via the relays within the chargers. So therefore it's limited to just that panel rather than the entire ecosystem. So this means that we can bring the cost down even further for a larger site beyond just one panel of energy optimization. It's also important to note that we are the software provider in the back office. We can provide charge point operator services, but in the instance of apartment blocks, we appreciate that MDUs and apartment blocks as a customer base have definitely been neglected compared to the rest of the market in the EV charging. And that's simply because of the complexity that's involved in trying to get the installations complete, the stakeholders that are involved, the various hurdles that need to be jumped over before you can get to the design and installation phase. And so we are trying to leverage our software to make this as efficient a process as possible. And then we work with installers, specialist installers, and CPOs who are able to arrange all of the stakeholder meetings, get to the design and installation, and then complete the installation in an efficient manner. One such installer and CPO that we will be working with is a company called EV who we'll be happy to introduce. And we have a specific deal, which I'll show at the end of the meeting, which is for a NextBlue charger bundled with Wevo software. And then we can install it and manage the entire process and manage the chargers all with EV as the charge point operator. So just to go into a specific case study. So this is a very large MDU residential complex. You can see that there is around, I think there's about 200 to 500 parking spaces that will be electrified. There's a further over 1,000 parking spaces all underground beneath this residential complex here. And one of the main issues that they had was limited power supply. So the property managers required all of the tenants to have autonomy in choosing which charger they wanted. And so they needed a solution that was able to capitalize on the existing supply, give them an agnostic solution on the EV chargers, as well as keeping the costs low and making sure all of the communication and the cabling works as it should. So we were able to win this project from about 40 different people tendering. And we were able to prove that using our software, just what the cost savings can be. So if you look at the bottom section there, we actually introduced what we call string architecture. So it's another word for daisy chaining the chargers, which is what I was showing on the previous slides. And unlike the traditional setups, where the competitors would have been looking at 40 to 50 kilometers of cable, that would have cost around £1 million for this site. Our solution with the string architecture actually came out at roughly half that cost at £500,000. So it reduces the cost considerably, but it also reduces complexity. And therefore, the MDUs that we're working with already are really keen on this idea because it means that they can get the infrastructure into these sites much more effectively, and all the stakeholders are happy along the process. So this is the deal that we are looking to run, and it's in collaboration with a charge point manufacturer called NextBlue. NextBlue have a charger which is a two-part modular design, meaning that they have a backplate and then they have the main charger which can slot in. And that is brilliant for MDUs in the UK, mainly because you can claim the grant on the passive infrastructure where you don't have the charger installed and the active infrastructure. So you can plan ahead for how many bays you need to electrify, but at the same time claim the grant whilst it's still available, the landlord grant, against that infrastructure as well. And then to go one step better, what we can do is we can bundle the Wevo Pro software subscription for 3 years into these chargers for a slightly additional cost, but it means that as a bundle, you can claim the landlord grant, which is £350 off the charger and the software together. And then that gives you a cost of £240 ex VAT per charger for the 7 kilowatt charge version and £340 for the 22 kilowatt version. And this is something that we're looking to offer with our installer and CPO partner, EVon. And then the installation costs are surplus to that. They can range, so I would advise that the range would be anywhere in the region of kind of 400 to 800 pounds per charger. But that's subject to a site survey because the complexity can obviously vary between one site to another. But it means that we can reduce the cost considerably to the property managers, to the tenants, and hopefully make it a lot more pain-free in terms of getting the infrastructure on site as well. And then this is just looking forward. So obviously we need to focus on the here and now, which is getting EV chargers onto site, alleviating a lot of the issues around that, a lot of the hurdles, working with the installer and CPO EVon to navigate the stakeholder management, navigate fire and rescue, navigate everything else that's surplus to the actual installation and the EV chargers. And then beyond that, you have the smart energy ecosystem, which is what Wevo is able to provide, because we're building out an ecosystem of renewable asset solutions in conjunction with our parent company, SolarEdge, because SolarEdge is building what's called Solar, where we can bring together the PV on the roof, we can bring that down to the EV chargers, we can bring in battery energy storage systems, we can look at microgrid solutions, virtual power plants where you can flex the energy on site, meaning that you can earn money back on your EV charging over time when you're able to respond to price signals from the national grid. So there's a lot of interesting, cool stuff that we can do further down the line, but this is very much looking into the future, this slide. Right now, what we can do is focus on reducing costs to you as property managers, making your life plain and simple in terms of getting the EVC infrastructure in place, and working with the likes of EVon to manage all of the stakeholders, make it pain-free, scale the infrastructure effectively, and essentially reduce costs for everyone. So it's a pleasure to speak to you all today. That was the end of the presentation. So I'll just move to a Q&A now. So if anyone does have any questions, and if anyone indeed knows what OCPP stands for, please do let me know. Thank you.
Hi, Fraser. I'm just having a look. We've got no questions at the moment, but I'll just give it a minute to see if there's any questions that people would like to submit now.
Perfect.
No, nothing quite coming yet. What we can do is, if you send me a copy of your slides, I can pass them on to everyone who's joined us, and then if you have any questions, feel free, you can follow up with Fraser directly. The webinar has been recorded as well, so if anyone would like to watch it back for any of the information that Fraser shared, you'll be able to have a look on our YouTube from this afternoon and see the webinar again. Otherwise, thank you very much, Fraser, for your time in presenting today.
Thank you.
And I will pass on your details to everyone so they can get in touch with you.
Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.